Amber, hello and welcome to season 2.
Hi, Martin. I can't believe season 2. Wow.
Yes.
We did 28 episodes.
28 episodes, and
for
here we
season
are,
1. Amazing.
back for 2026.
For 2026. Things are different and also the same. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it. How about you?
Me too. And from what I understand, nothing happened in 2025 globally, in the world. It was a pretty boring year.
I was going to say, I didn't move or anything at the end of the year that threw me into chaos. Nope, none of that happened.
No. Pretty easy. And so as I was preparing for season 2, of course, one can't help but go back and remember where it all began. So if you think about it, we actually recorded our first podcast almost perfectly 1 year ago.
That's right, because we did a few test episodes at the end of the year, just because we were kind of playing with the idea of whether we should do it or not.
That's right.
And then those episodes turned out to be so good that we integrated them over the first
Yes,
season.
we did.
And yeah, it was, and so we start again.
And so we start again. And so if I can bring you back 12 months ago
Yes.
to the very first time I surprised you with a question, it was around, hey, have you noticed anything about, and it was pretty subtle back then, only 1 or 2 articles, a pushback against DEI.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Boy, did that ramp up in
Yes.
2020.
Yes. And then we did a follow-on podcast to just how much that ramped up.
Well, and I have to say, in full disclosure, since then, since a year ago, since the follow-up episode that we posted, I continue to have pushback. In fact, I had my own personal situation that occurred with a pushback on it. And I think I know what the problem is.
That is not where I was going to take this. But if you want that to be the podcast, I love it. I mean, what a way to start the year.
It's so interesting that you're asking, or you bring this up now, because I've actually been really perseverating on this because it bothers me. Because as you know, and as our listeners know, I'm incredibly passionate about this. But I continue to hit that wall over and over and over again. And the interesting thing is the wall comes in unexpected places. So full disclosure, in my mind, a lot of times I expect it from certain people who I know where their politics line up. Or I expect it from people who have specific affiliations with certain organizations or associations. And I think, oh, yeah, that's not unusual to me that they would push back against caring about diversity, inclusion, and equity. But honestly, it's the anonymity of the pushback in 2025 that pushed me over the edge. It's the silence until we're going to subversively attack you from a different angle, but you're not going to know who we are. And that's what blew my mind in 2025, which means I really had to come to terms with the fact that there are individuals and groups and associations that I professionally integrated with that I did not know, nor did they ever disclose to me how offended they were that I cared about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the only way I found out they were is anonymously through feedback, post-delivery, post-project, and then it was personal attack.
Mm.
It was not, professionally, this harmed the project. It's, no, Amber is biased. And wow, does that cut like a knife for me. So that is the reason that I've spent so much time thinking about it. And I think that's also the reason that I literally just in the last little bit have started to think about what is actually going on. And I do have a very, I should say, a growing suspicion that I know the answer. So when I say I think I know the answer, I really do think that I understand it. And I am still in the journey to it, but being asked by you right now kind of feels like putting me on the spot to talk out loud about what I think is happening.
Okay. So, as host, I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
We could answer that question, or I could tell you the question I was going to ask you, or we could save that for another podcast.
No, I think tell me the question you were going to ask me, and then we'll see how they might actually align.
Well, it's funny because I've been thinking about this a lot too.
Yeah, or else you wouldn't have brought it up.
Well, and what came up to me was I wasn't going to say what we think about DEI. We've covered those grounds. But for me, I always come back to the method. What was the execution of the method? So for me, I notice that there is an organized response to push against DEI. It wasn't accidental.
Right.
It was organized. What I was going to ask was, we talk a lot about the importance of how we align our teams.
Mhm.
Someone aligned their team pretty effectively here. This was a pretty effective execution. And I wanted to talk about the importance of team charter, because someone had to make a team charter somewhere
Mhm.
that says we're pushing back against this.
Yeah.
And on either side of the equation, the importance of that charter, the importance of and you just brought out the place around overtness versus being behind the scenes.
Right.
If you believe it, I don't care if we disagree.
Yeah.
I care if you're hiding and disagreeing, if
That's
I'm being public.
well,
And so
that's
maybe
my
that's a
problem.
space we can talk about combined.
So the lack of authenticity is what bothers me the most. And also the belief that I can't handle it. That if I say to someone in a conversation something that offends them, that they simply cannot share with me that they were offended. Now, if it happens to be around diversity, equity, and inclusion, fine, but it could be about anything. They can't authentically share with me in that present moment what their emotions, their true, authentic feelings are. That is what challenges me to think differently about, well, what's actually going on? And I think for me, I am beginning to recognize that there is a culture of anti DEI that has nothing to do with how to treat people. Because it actually is, it's an ethereal concept, it's a politicized rhetoric, and in the day in and day out, it doesn't hold up. Because successful projects, for instance, that I work on, they end or come to a resolve more successfully when individuals, interest holders, and the people on the project treat each other with mutual respect. That just, it's like it's like a golden rule. It just always works better. It also doesn't mean that we haven't had tough times. It just means that the tough times have come. We have hopefully authentically shown up, navigated the challenge, made different decisions, also changed our own personal minds based on context, subjectivity, that happens. And we've been able to do all of that because we have some version of respect and, for that matter, have built trust with one another. So I have a lot of interest holders in my project that have views that I don't agree with. But that has nothing to do with my need to treat them with positive regard and for them to be able to respect me as a professional. And so for me, I think it's the term. I think it's the acronym. And I think it is literally that we keep talking about DEI. And I am faced at the beginning of 2026 looking at all of the places in my life, even as an educator, where I teach DEI. And I am thinking to myself, you know what? I know other people like to put the letters in different orders, EDI. And do you know what? We need to scrap them all together. We need to change the conversation. And it's interesting, as a communication instructor, I am always talking about the use of acronyms being one of the easiest ways to create miscommunication. And I'm talking to a ex-military guy, so you know all about acronyms. But the idea that we create acronyms to create camaraderie and shared understanding, but we forget that actually, if anyone questions or forgets what they stand for, nobody has the nerve to ask why or what, or can you define it for me, because they're embarrassed. So I think we need to just scrap the letters altogether. And you know what? Maybe we need to scrap the words, not because the words don't mean what's important, but just let's stop talking about them in that order. Let's stop talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion in its cultural understanding. Let's talk about what we really mean, which is, you don't look like me. You didn't grow up like I did. You don't have the same cultural even language experience, because you grew up in an Italian family, you had Italian around, I had no other language than English. You and I have such differences that at a very base level could divide us, could make us not want to share understanding. But honestly, I don't want those things to be an impediment to me seeing you and valuing you in any way that I can. I'm like, if we talk about it that way, it's a very different conversation than if we say, well, my DEI mandate would say that I have to expect and treat you a certain way. No, that's not right. How you are as a human, how you and I, even though we share things in common, we have so many things that are not common. Valuing each other's differences. And then, and I love this part, it's my favorite, one of my favorite words, leverage the difference. Because when you and I see a problem, I only see it in my bias. You only see it in your bias. But when you and I share our bias together, and then we see each other's bias at that problem, we see more of the broad spectrum of solution. There's more opportunity for us to see it in a different way because we share each other's, I hate to keep using the same word bias, but it is true. Like, bias isn't a bad word. How we behave with our bias can be sadly it can go awry, put it that way. And I take responsibility too when someone even anonymously comments that I am biased when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion. They're correct. They totally are correct. But that bias also is, but trust me to do something wise with my bias, which is have a conversation about it and trust you and I to look at a problem, see how each other comes at it very differently. And at the same time, when we share that, gives us more opportunity to see different perspectives, different solutions, different opportunities. So anyway, that's my 10 cents on what I think the solution might be. And I think language and I think the words themselves have created a culture that is actually taking us further away from what is actually helpful and what I'm quite passionate about.
That's I love where you're going with language there. As you know, I'm both coach and IT professional.
Yes.
And we've had conversations in the past about the word connected. That when I'm an IT professional, connected means do all my systems and wires work together in such a way that there's a mutual conversation. When I'm using connected as coach, it's deep, meaningful, impactful relationships.
Yeah.
It's the same word, but it's holding two very different values depending on the context in the room I'm in.
That's right.
And what I loved about what you said there was the politicization of DEI.
Yeah.
Because there's what it means just on its face.
Yes.
And then what it's come to mean as a concept.
Love that. What it has come to mean.
Yes. And so as I think about words changing, I remember at 13 years old, someone said to me, "You're a nerd." And nerd was very much meant to be hurtful and impactful.
Yes.
And when my daughter was 13, someone was like, "You're a nerd." And they were celebrating and high five. And I'm like, how?
That's not fair.
It's like 20 years. What happened to nerd in 20 years where it went from, well, I think Bill Gates happened to nerd in 20 years because the nerds were running everything.
I was going to say the nerds took over.
The nerds were running the show now and nerds were cool.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing the uncooling of a word. I don't think the concept is bad. I don't think what it stands for is bad. But I think what its politicized idea has become. I don't know. I'm curious what you think about. Sorry.
Don't you think when you say politicized idea, I guess what I hear is agenda. I hear people talk about that there is a EDI or DEI agenda.
Yes.
And that's the politicalized version.
Yeah.
I will tell you, I disagree with that. I would very much never want to, as a professional, associate myself with an agenda of DEI as a behavior. And I love to use the example of giving unconditional positive regard to others in a professional space. And that's a Carl Jung thing, right? That comes from psychology because he founded the idea of unconditional positive regard is what therapists need to hold in order to appropriately support their clients and to appropriately be able to, help them, share with them, hear them, see them, value them, even though their behavior and what they'll talk about may be incredibly offensive to the human, the therapist themselves. And so I always appreciated that unconditional positive regard being the where you stand. And full disclosure, I've sucked at that in my professional career. Because there are times where I walk into a room and the idea that I'm going to muster unconditional positive regard for some of the a-holes I've witnessed, it's a lot. But I do think it's what I want to always be aspiring to. That instead of deciding they have ill intent or they're acting with malice, instead decide that they aren't. And then if they are, actually have them and their behavior have to prove it to me. And so it's kind of like reversing it in that,
Right.
because I think, if I want to find negative, I never have to look very far. But if I believe positive, it's the same as true. You don't have to look far. I mean, I think a lot of us are just some of us are just trying to survive ourselves and our workplaces and our projects and our environments. And I just think unconditional positive regard is this predisposition that we're all really ultimately trying to do the right thing, even though we come at it from different angles.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of one person in particular that I really struggle with. And yet at the same time, I will say I work very hard to continue to extend them unconditional positive regard. It's tough though. So I think it's an aspirational goal for me.
I liked how you brought psychology in, because I believe in unconditional positive regard as well.
Right.
But in practice, it is such a difficult thing. But one of the things I did hear you say there that really, because you talked about how therapists use that as the tool by which they create a safe space.
Well, I think we hope that they do.
Yes.
It's encouraged.
And that got me thinking about coaching and what is the tool we use to create that same space. And that safe space is created in coaching by curiosity.
Yeah.
And for me, I think this is where we're aligned, is the conversation stopped being curious at one point. Where we didn't go, what is it you're really trying to do? And what is it I'm really trying to do? And what it started becoming at one point was, because we're talking about how we disagree.
Yeah.
And I'm a debater. I love a good debate.
So
I relish debate. You've seen me do it at times when I don't even agree with the point I'm debating.
I came 7th nationally in grade 10 for debating.
Yes.
So I am all about debating myself.
Yes. But debating always has a respect to it. There's a rule of how we play the game.
Although politicians of our day do not do this justice, let's face it.
And that's a little bit of what I was going to say. We never rise to the best in us. We fall to whatever's common. And what's common right now is a very negative conversation.
You're right. I really like that you phrased it that way. We fall to what is common. And I think, that's the thing, like our standards need to be higher than that. So I think even for me, the conversation around DEI, it is actually about standard of treatment of humankind. That's what I'm interested in. And the interesting thing too is that it's in my professional life, but it's not just there. It should be in every environment. And I mean, I have to say in my upbringing, that came from a religious kind of affiliation where I was told I had to XYZ with other people. But in reality, what I'm really working hard to grasp is the authenticity in myself to just really see positive in others, and that I want that standard. I just want my standard to be higher. That's what I want. You know what else? I don't like the idea of expectations even around we have to have X amount of people this way in order to balance a workplace. What? I want fairness. I want equity, but I am also aware that what I also probably value over both of those things even more is successful life lived together, successful work worked together, which means that that we can't litigate this. We can in the courts, but in the human connection, the litigating doesn't do it. It's actually how we make people feel. Like when you walk into a room, how are you made to feel? What does your presence sense, and vice versa? And that's where I want that unconditional positive regard to rest. It's a very, very complex, difficult thing to do, but I think it should be what we work towards.
I like the word that you used, litigate, because one of the things that I've always talked about, I love law, is that if you break it down, law is literally a versus. It's called the adversarial system of government. It is the adversarial system of justice. There has to be a versus.
Yeah.
And if there's a versus, there has to be two positions and they have to duke it out.
True.
As opposed to here's a space called difference.
Mm-hmm.
It's none of those three words.
Yeah.
Difference. We know we're going to work with people who are different.
Mm-hmm.
How do we approach that? Do we approach it as adversaries?
Right.
Or do we approach it even as colleague? I'm not saying friend or team or whatever.
No.
Not even at that level.
Mm-hmm.
But the colleague, and I think this is what you were talking about, is missing from even some of our political discourse.
Yes.
The natural respect of we can disagree and be okay from the language of, I'm going to say, demonization, or language of harm and hurt.
Yeah.
That if you don't think the concept of something being un-American, that's a concept that really makes me go, really? You can do a thing? Like you can hold an idea?
Un-Canadian, for that matter.
Or un-Canadian.
Exactly.
Wherever
you come from.
How is there a committee?
Yeah.
Do we, who determines those spaces? And we don't have a space, but someone will hold that as if they're part of the whatever committee.
Right.
And so I'm hearing that's the real...
I think it is, because I think, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to have a passionate stance or passionate opinion. But it is how does that, and how, when we hold that and we share that, how does that affect other people? How does that make people feel? And I just think a really good example is pronouns. If someone tells you their pronouns, then use the pronouns they've told you. If that person has never told you their pronouns, then use the assumed pronouns until you're corrected. If you are corrected, there's absolutely no reason to be upset about that. You don't get to determine someone else's pronouns. The language of English itself is the most chaotic language we have. It does. I mean, there are so many exceptions to every. So the fine tooth and comb of this pronoun conversation is you do your best, and then when someone informs you of something different, then you make the change. That person isn't asking for you to redefine your language understanding. They're just asking you to call them who they are, who they feel they are. And the only person who can define who they are is them, not you. So I just let it go. Let it go. It's okay. I feel very much that way about a lot of, and of course, I'm an English speaker, primary English speaker. So I butt up against the English language all the time, and I'm not happy with it all the time. At the same time, I don't want it to be a weapon of mass destruction for me. And boy, can it be, based on the words that I can flippantly say or intentionally say. I can really create harm. If I have created harm, I really do want to be held accountable for that. And I want people to just say to me, hey, Amber, when you said that bothered me. That offended me. I want that. I really, really do. I want the feedback, not so I can tell them they're wrong. I want the feedback so that I can understand their context, that I can accept that word for them in that moment offended them. That I want to take responsibility for. And I think this is the utmost professionalism that we can give to one another in a work environment. And I don't think it's about a 3-word acronym that we spin. And I think the more we keep saying that's what it is, the more I keep teaching those 3 words as that's what it is, I think the more I continue to inform a culture that is just, it's misleading. It is literally, it does have an agenda. And I am not subscribed to that agenda. I'm subscribed only to how is it that we use language to make people feel? And how do we treat each other?
How do we use language to make people feel, and how do we treat each other?
Yeah.
If we could only make that part of all of our projects and all of our conversations.
But we can. We just have to do it.
Yes. Well, it's a choice.
It is. It's a choice. And it isn't more work. Maybe initially it is. But I think initially it's more work because it's different. And that's the problem. As humans, we like same, we like comfort. We don't love different at first. And then different becomes beautiful. So I think we can all get there.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I look forward to this different, respectful, communicative workplace.
Yeah, so do I. So 2026, we have our work cut out for us, but I believe we can get there.
I'm sure nothing will change in 2026. And when we sit here a year from now to start season 3, everything will be sunshine and rainbows.
But change too, also, just hear this. We don't need to lobby politicians. We don't need to change, organizational, environments from the top. We as individuals can do it because the impact is in the micro moments. And those little moments, one to one, one to a few, we can impart that change without question, because how we make people feel is actually something felt at a very small level. So people want to say, oh, we got to get up in arms and fight. And I'm like, no, actually, we can do that at the macro, but the micro actually has an impact and makes change, positive change.
You don't need to be elbows up for everything.
Right.
Be elbows up in your own way, in your own life.
Agreed. Yeah.
So Canadians, elbows up.
And Americans, I'm not sure what we say, but
that elbow is connected to a hand, and we're here to shake that hand if you want.
Gosh, and for all of our other listeners all over the world, we don't know what your isms are, but yeah, I think we all can probably relate to what we've chatted about on some level.
Right. Well, thank you for today, and I look forward to the next one.
Thanks, Martin.